Brave New World. It feels that way with cultural mores that are changing and technologies that are changing all at the same time. We've got Twitter and YouTube and Snapchat and Instagram, and I don't even know what even the newest ones are. They seem to change almost overnight. And sometimes it's for the better, and sometimes it's not so much for the better. But amazingly enough, all these new technologies have actually had a great impact on the expression of our various sexualities, specifically through the internet. For example, the general mainstream has access to information and is forming communities of support around various sexualities. And just 20 years ago, for example, people's vocabulary and understanding about what sexuality basically was pretty much limited. You had sort of heterosexual, homosexual, and maybe you knew about bisexuality. But with people able to share their experiences across the world, it turns out there's actually a much wider experience of sexualities out there. So for example, now there's things called pansexual or omnisexual. Okay? These are very similar, but a pansexual person is sort of gender blind and they're just attracted to all people, just based on the person. And an omnisexual person says, no, I do see the gender of that person and I'm attracted to all genders. So, see? Interesting new ways of looking at things, right? There's something, this was a new one for me, called demisexual. So demisexual is someone who's attracted based on someone's strong emotions. So they have a strong emotional connection to people. Sapiosexual, I'd heard this one before, is sexually attracted to intelligence. That was kind of interesting. Now, autosexual is not attraction to cars. Just saying. So this is someone who prefers to be with themselves rather than someone else, right? Then there's asexual, which some of you have heard about, as someone who doesn't experience sexual attraction. And then this is an interesting one called graysexual, which is someone who only very occasionally experiences sexual attraction, but usually not. And some of the fastest growing websites out there are on sexually supportive issues like all of these. You know, the internet can be a really kind of amazing place for disseminating information. It can be a place for couples to explore new ways of being with one another or get support around sexuality issues, whatever they may be. So the internet has allowed for information to just basically flow around and people with these different experiences to reach out to one another and find support. And in fact, there's actually something called computer-mediated relating. This is a whole science of study of this, how people are using computers and the internet to relate to one another. And basically, what's been kind of interesting is that this was in particular before YouTube and things like Snapchat and Instagram, but it still proves to be the case, is that a lot of people, in a culture that emphasizes physical attraction, a lot of computer relating has no visual to it, right? Think about texting, you think about, I play online games and you're just chatting. You might have voice, but you rarely have picture. There's chat rooms, there's forums, email, that sort of thing. And so what's interesting is that they're noticing this is changing the way people are relating to one another, and they might get to know one another first over these different mediums. So for example, I have a friend of mine who lives up in Sacramento, and she met her husband playing World of Warcraft. So because all they did was they would chat. And he lived in Texas and she lived in Sacramento, and they met and now they're married and live up in Sacramento. So I know a number of people who have met this way. And they started out simply as friends chatting. And it can also, this way of relating can also, help people not get caught up in gender roles or even ageism. As someone who is a gamer and all you can hear is people's voices, you don't see them, I notice that people are less likely to, for example, treat children as children, but treat them a bit more as adults, and vice versa as well. So if you're older, they can't tell, so they're not going to treat you as if you're old, which is kind of nice as a gamer who's been gaming now for 15 years. So, I'm often one of the more older people on there, but I don't get treated that way because nobody knows, right? So email, texting, internet can all be used to enhance intimacy in relationships. That is, that technology like the internet can promote healthy sexuality in relationships. But of course, it can also be used for harm. So there are healthy life-enhancing modes of sexuality, and there's also destructive modes. It's all on a continuum, right? And our sexuality can be used to build up our best selves, and it can be used to build up others, or it can be used to harm ourselves and others. And when sexuality and the internet, when they collide in destructive ways, we have some really big challenges. So that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk about porn, okay? Yeah. Porn, that's not something you hear about in church all that much, but just so you know, I'm not going to be preaching about pornography as a moral issue, okay? I want to talk about it actually as a medical issue. So I'm talking about both pornography and erotica, and the problem is that people might argue about what the differences of those are, and I'm not going to get into that today, because where they draw the line of what that is bound up in aesthetics and morals and religious values, all of those things. So I'm not going to try to define those differences nor argue. You can figure out what that means for you. But just getting aroused by looking at erotic images or even hearing them has always been around, and it's natural and it's normal. Of course, issues of misogyny, violence and pornography, pedophilia notwithstanding, I'm not going to go there. I want to talk about pornography because it's sort of available in this what's called the AAA engine, right? In the age of the internet, it's available in a way that was never imagined before. So it has this triple thing. It has accessibility, right? It has accessibility when you don't even want it to, okay? I was talking to someone yesterday, and he's a civil engineer, and he said, yeah, I was doing an internet search for backflow. Yeah. It comes up whether or not you want it to, which is really annoying. The other amazing thing is its affordability. That is, in many cases, it's free, right? In fact, the statistics are anywhere from $70 to $97 billion industry. Billion dollar industry, right? Okay, just so you know, to put that in perspective, that is more than the annual revenue of all the major sports franchises combined. That is larger than the amount of foreign aid that we give, okay? And of course, there's the anonymity, right? You can watch porn in the privacy of your home. You can get it on your phone. No one knows who you are. You can put in a fake name. Doesn't matter. But again, we're not talking about it as a moral issue, but all of this influencing what I'm going to talk about as a medical. Because of this trifecta, people are exposed to porn more than ever before. Okay? So let me start you off with some statistics on pornography. Just so you know, so there's about 40 million Americans visit porn sites regularly. That means more than once a month, okay? 70% of men visit porn sites regularly. And this really surprised me, 33%, 1 in 3 women visit porn sites regularly, okay? 12% of websites out there are pornographic. That's a lot. 25% of all search engine requests are pornographic related. And this was sort of interesting to me. 35% of all downloads are pornography. 35%. I think also because they're big files, okay? So they're large things there. So interesting, if you might not know, the least popular day for watching is Thanksgiving. And my personal favorite statistic is this: the most popular day for watching porn? Sunday. I'm not going there. So all of this, I just want to say that pornography is big, big business. It's everywhere, but it's hidden. We don't talk about it, and we need to. And why do we need to? Because porn addiction is the fastest growing addiction in this country. Let me say that again. Porn addiction is the fastest growing addiction in this country, beyond heroin, beyond any other drug. And it's the most hidden. So 1 in 6 women struggle with porn addiction. 1 in 3 men struggle with porn addiction. So that's half of the statistics who are people who go regularly, that's half of them are struggling with porn addiction. The biggest growth in porn addiction are ages 12 to 17. That's scary. The average age someone's exposed to porn is, some people say 9, other people say 11, and by age 14, 94% have been exposed to pornography, okay? Like I said, you can't really get away from it. So now you might be thinking, like, okay, porn addiction, really, why don't they just turn off the computer? Like, wouldn't that just sort of solve the problem? Turns out that porn addiction is just like any other addiction. Let me explain a little bit. We're going to go into the science of addiction here for just a minute, a little segue. So, our brain is full of neural pathways. Now, I really like this representation of pathways, but our brain, as you know, does not look like this. I just want to make sure you all know that. But I like it because it's all of these neural pathways are different things that we do automatically, right? That we don't even necessarily think about. These are synapses that are fired that go, okay, I need to do this, 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 and this, and we don't even think about it. Breathing is a synapses that's firing. It's a pathway that's firing. So, for example, remember when you learned to ride a bike? At first, maybe you were wobbly and you had to concentrate, right? We're building synapses, we were building pathways. But after a while, like any pathway that's worn down from constant use, right? The bike riding becomes automatic, and that's why we say, oh, it's like riding a bike, right? Because you never forget. Once that pathway is there, you never forget. Pathways don't go away. Now, it's interesting, the same thing happens with addictions, only the addictions, the neural pathways are linked to pleasure. Any addiction, they're linked to pleasure. So you take a drug or alcohol or porn or whatever it is, and it stimulates dopamine and the opioid receptors in your brain. That releases pleasure, right? It creates a pathway. So after a while, that pathway gets fixed. Only it takes more of the stuff to release the dopamine and the opioid because your body is compensated for it in order to get that same kind of high. And that's whether it's drugs, porn, whatever it is. So in other words, if your trigger is stress, the pathway fires and it goes, ooh, let's go have that thing that makes me feel really good. That pathway just leads you down there. It's without even thinking. You go there to use whatever that addiction is. And after a while, you need more of whatever that addictive materials you have in order to feel the same dopamine-induced pleasure. And if you're younger than your mid-20s, which is when by about the early to mid-20s, your brain is done developing. But if you're younger than that, the neural pathways are being influenced by drugs and alcohol and porn. We don't even entirely know what the long-term effects of this is. But the fear is that the pathways are actually even more deep and more difficult to create new ones. In the case of pornography, what this addiction means is that you need greater and more unique stimulation, read more hardcore, okay, in order to reach an orgasm. And in addition, like every addiction, the brain gets desensitized to what will be considered normal. So people who have become addicted to porn have a hard time, even going out on a date because they're not turned on anymore. They don't feel that attraction. They need sort of the hyper stimulation, the super stimulation that they had before. In porn addiction, this neural dysfunction has led to a serious increase in erectile dysfunction. Interesting. And for women, it's the same thing. It's just not as obvious for women, right? But we have similar problems around getting aroused. So this is what's interesting statistics here around this. So porn-induced erectile dysfunction is called PIDE. I don't know why, but there you go. So prior to 2002, and the internet was around at this time, but prior to 2002, porn wasn't as big of a deal, okay? And 2 to 3% of young men, basically 18 to 40, had experienced ED, okay? That's 2002. In 2007, actually, it's not 2006, I forgot to change it there. 2007, Pornhub came online. If you don't know Pornhub, it is the largest pornographic site. It's based out of Canada in the world, okay? In 2008, a study was done of similar aged men, ages under age 40, and the increase was 14 to 35% depending on the study. Now what's interesting is that there is no recent study on this, so in 2019, But what they've noticed is this huge boom in porn addiction websites that have come up. And so they believe that it's actually gotten even larger, this amount of porn addiction. And it's all because of that AAA engine. Our brains are not evolutionarily ready for that much stimulation, right? It's just, we're not ready for that. We don't know. I mean, in the past, maybe you had a Playboy or a Playgirl or something like that, or a few magazines, but the amount that's happening, that's stimulating our brain, is overwhelming the brain, and it's creating havoc. And of course, erectile dysfunction, ED, is not the only issue with porn addiction. Like any addiction, it has many different side effects, okay? So for example, secretive behavior. Again, nobody's talking about this. It's really fascinating. As big of an issue this is, people are not talking about it. But people's secretive behavior is often around shame around this issue, right? The less we talk about it, the more shameful it feels. So there's secretive behavior. You don't tell your loved one. You hide away in a room. There are cravings that happens, that pleasure dopamine desire. It makes your body want more. There are physical and mental symptoms of withdrawal. It can take up to a year to recuperate from porn addiction. And of course, you need more each time you get the same experience. And the one that's a little bit scary, and this actually goes for just about every sign of addiction that's out there, is that there's often risky behavior associated. So in the case of porn, interesting statistics show that 20% of men and 13% of women have watched porn at work, knowing that they could be fired, right? This is how the addiction gets to you. You're willing to risk your job, you're willing to risk your schoolwork, you're willing to risk anything for that hit. As a culture, we're trying to figure out how to use these technologies like the internet responsibly. But we're not going to solve our problems by not talking about them. And I really wanted people here to know about this, because whether it's for yourself or your family or your children or your grandchildren, this is some of what they're facing. They're gonna be facing. And we need to talk about it. Right now in our church, our junior high school students are getting probably the best sexuality education that is out there. It's award-winning curriculum. It's called OWL, okay? Our Whole Lives. I mean, even Oprah, endorses this program, okay? It's a really amazing program. And OWL was started in the early 90s, and it was a joint venture between the Unitarian Universalists and the UCC Church, which is a very liberal Christian denomination, because we knew that information wasn't getting out there, and we very much wanted our kids to be informed. Now, today is their last day in OWL, in their junior high OWL. So today's sermon is in part, it's kind of an homage to them, because they're entering a brave new world where technologies are influencing, for better or for worse, how their sexuality is going to be expressed. And they're facing potentially a really big problem. And this information that I've given you today around porn addiction is so new that's not even taught in this. I was trying to find, I called Judy and I was like, are we teaching our kids anything about this? This information has come to light really only in the last 5 to 10 years because it's so secretive. People are not talking about it. It's important that we as responsible adults not hide our head in the sand and look at this squarely, because addictions can tear families apart. And I want to end on another really important topic. There's a lot of shame around discussing sexuality and pornography. Porn or erotica can be titillating and fun, but there's also a lot of pain around it. Pain around how we think about it. And I don't want to make light of it at all. If you or someone you know is struggling with any kind of addiction, porn or otherwise, please know that I do provide a very non-judgmental, supportive space for people to talk to. And I'm a minister, I've heard everything, okay? Trust me. And I promise I will not bludgeon you with my beliefs. Now, I'm not a therapist, but I can point you in the right direction to get whatever help that is needed. And as I say, there's a lot of support on the internet as well. Because, our own individual sexuality, it's so intimate. It's so precious, right? It's sacred, and it's vulnerable. So I want you to know that here in this church, all of you is held in love. Every last bit of you. Let us sing.